50 to 70% of you listening right now, at least according to some recent phone surveys, say the cost of living here in Papua New Guinea is just, well, it's suffocating you.
Yeah, it really is.
Right. Like the price of a bag of rice, the cost to catch a PMV, buying clothes for your kids. It all feels way heavier than ever before. But if you actually look at the official government numbers for 2024, headline inflation dropped to a record low of 0.6%.
Which just sounds completely made up to anyone buying groceries.
Exactly. It feels like gaslighting. So today, we are going to explain why both of those realities are entirely true at the exact same time. And spoiler alert here, a massive part of the explanation comes down to an oversupply of betel nut in Port Moresby.
Yeah, Dewey Economics.
Dewey Economics, exactly. So welcome to the research room. We're researchers right here in PNG, and we have gathered just a mountain of data on the desk today for this deep dive.
A literal mountain.
Yeah, we're looking at the World Bank's 2025 economic update. We've got the latest monetary policy statements from the Bank of Papua New Guinea, some really deep analysis from the PNG National Research Institute, and global commodity monitors like Fairleigh Mitchell.
It's a lot of paper to go through, but, our job is to synthesize all of this for you. We spend our days buried in these economic models to decipher what's actually happening in the structural foundation of our country.
Right.
Because we're not interested in just reciting top-line statistics. We want to understand the actual mechanisms. Like, how does a policy signed in an air-conditioned boardroom in Port Moresby actually change the soil, the labor, and the cash flow in places like Bougainville?
Okay, let's unpack this. The mission for this deep dive is to decode the massive collision happening right now between global financial shifts and our local agricultural booms. We want to figure out what this macroeconomic turbulence actually means for your daily life and, your family's future.
Yeah, to bring it back home.
Exactly. So let's start by looking at the broad health of the PNG economy before diagnosing the symptoms that the average citizen is feeling right now.
Okay, sounds good.
So looking at the World Bank's 2025 economic update, it paints a picture that actually looks surprisingly optimistic at first glance. PNG's GDP grew by 3.8% in 2024.
Right, which is a solid number.
It is. But the driver of that growth was, it was completely unexpected.
Yeah, it completely flips the traditional narrative of the PNG economy on its head. I mean, we are so used to relying on the resource sector, mining, oil, gas, to pull the economic cart.
Right, that's always the story.
But the resource sector actually lagged significantly behind expectations last year. The Porgera gold mine finally reopened, but it suffered severe operational disruptions, meaning it only operated at like 45% capacity.
Wow, under half.
Yeah, under half. So because mining stumbled so badly, the non-resource sector, specifically agriculture, really had to do the heavy lifting to achieve that 3.8% growth.
Which brings me back to that wild contradiction I mentioned at the very start of the deep dive. I really want to push on this because, like I said, it feels like a lie to the average person. The official headline inflation rate plummeted to 0.6% in 2024.
Yeah, the headline rate.
But the World Bank does these high-frequency phone surveys, right? They call everyday people across the provinces, and 50 to 70% of respondents feel like prices are rising way, way too fast. So how on earth can inflation officially be 0.6% when your wallet is emptying faster every single week?
It is the perfect example of why relying purely on headline numbers is so dangerous. We have to separate headline inflation from core inflation.
Okay, break that down for us.
So headline inflation takes a massive basket of goods, everything people buy, and averages out their price changes. Now, in early 2024, there was this unprecedented oversupply of betel nut flooding into Port Moresby.
Just truckloads of it.
Truckloads. Yeah. And the price of buai crashed so dramatically that it literally dragged the entire national average down. The math said inflation basically stopped, but the reality was just, cheap betel nut.
Wait, I have to pause you right there. Are you saying the price of buai crashing in the capital was mathematically heavy enough to skew the national economic data?
It absolutely was.
Yeah.
I know it sounds crazy, but betel nut is a heavily weighted item in our consumer price index because of just how frequently it is traded every single day.
That is wild.
But look, the Bank of Papua New Guinea, BPNG, they know this data is skewed. That's why they use a different measurement called the trimmed mean to calculate core inflation.
The trimmed mean.
Right. The trimmed mean literally trims off the extreme highs and the extreme lows, like that buai crash, to find the true middle ground. And when you look at that core inflation rate, it actually rose to 3.3%.
Ah, okay. So that 3.3% is the pain you're actually feeling at the cash register. That's the skyrocketing cost of public transport, the clothes on your back, and staple imported foods like rice.
Precisely. And BPNG Governor Elizabeth Kina made this the central focus of her September 2024 monetary policy statement. The central bank recognized that there was too much excess liquidity in the banking system.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning there was too much cash just floating around commercial banks, chasing too few goods, and when that happens, it drives up prices. So to fight this, they aggressively tightened monetary policy. They raised the Kina facility rate, or KFR, to 4.0% by September.
Let's explain the mechanism there for the listener, just to be clear. Because the KFR isn't the interest rate you get on your personal savings account, right?
Right, no, not at all.
It's the rate the central bank charges commercial banks to borrow money. So when BPNG raises that rate, it becomes more expensive for your local bank to get cash.
And they don't just eat that cost.
Exactly. They pass that cost on to you by raising interest rates on personal loans and mortgages, which, slows down spending and cools off those price hikes. But they didn't stop there, did they?
No, they went further.
Yeah.
They also increased the cash reserve requirement, the CRR, to 12%. And this is a very blunt, powerful tool.
How so?
Well, by setting the CRR at 12%, the central bank is legally forcing commercial banks to take 12% of all their customer deposits and literally lock them in a vault at BPNG.
Just take it completely out of play.
Exactly. The banks cannot lend that money out to businesses or to consumers. It physically mops up that excess cash from the streets.
And I think it's really worth noting the historic governance shift behind these moves, too. Like, these levers are no longer being pulled unilaterally behind closed doors by just one or two people.
Right, the structure has changed.
Yeah, we now have a newly established independent monetary policy committee, the MPC, making these decisions. It's a modernized central banking structure that was implemented under an IMF program.
Which actually brings us to the root cause of why everything from rice to imported fuel is so expensive right now. Because when we discuss core inflation in Papua New Guinea, we are ultimately discussing the health of our currency.
Yes.
We have to look at the foreign exchange crisis and the actual value of the Kina.
The dreaded FX shortage. I mean, anyone listening who runs a business knows this pain intimately. We pulled the PNG National Research Institute's 2023 and 2026 reports, and they just outline the history perfectly. For years, the Kina was artificially overvalued. We essentially had a fixed trading band.
Right, and think of that fixed rate like an artificial dam holding back a massive reservoir of water.
Okay, I like this analogy.
So on the surface of the reservoir, the water looks perfectly calm. That calm surface represents stable prices for imported goods. Because the Kina was kept artificially strong, buying electronics or rice from overseas felt relatively affordable.
But downstream from the dam, the river was completely dry. And that dry riverbed is our foreign exchange market. Businesses could not get their hands on US dollars.
No dollars at all.
Yeah, if you needed to import machinery parts for your factory or repatriate profits to international investors, you were put on a waiting list for months. It completely strangled commercial growth. So under that IMF program, BPNG started dismantling the dam. They shifted to a crawl-like flexible exchange rate.
Right. And to continue your analogy, a crawl-like peg means they aren't blowing up the dam all at once, because that would cause a catastrophic flood of hyperinflation.
Which would be disastrous.
Utterly disastrous. Instead, they're lowering the spillway in these tiny, scheduled, controlled increments. They are letting the Kina slowly depreciate to find its true market value.
It's like ripping off a financial Band-Aid, but doing it millimeter by millimeter.
Yeah, very slow pull.
It hurts immediately because a weaker Kina means every single imported item you buy immediately costs more. We literally import our inflation. But opening that spillway is the only way to heal the structural wound.
Exactly.
The goal is that money will flow freely again, businesses won't have to wait months for dollars, and our own domestic exports become highly attractive to global buyers.
Right, but the central question here is the strategy actually working?
Good question.
According to the PNG NRI analysis, the foreign exchange shortage has improved slightly. Central bank interventions are helping, and we are currently benefiting from incredibly high global prices for our export commodities, specifically gold and cocoa.
Which is great news.
It is. Those high prices are pulling a lot of foreign currency into our system. However, the report is very explicit about this. The rationing is not over.
I was actually going to ask about that. Like the queue for foreign currency might be shorter, but the door isn't exactly wide open, is it?
Not at all. Foreign exchange rationing will continue for an indefinite period. We're still highly vulnerable to structural risks and unpredictable commodity prices. Plus, we have severely limited foreign direct investment right now.
And the IMF program doesn't last forever.
Exactly. The IMF program will eventually end, which removes that structural guardrail. And crucially, we have the recent gray listing of PNG by the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF.
Okay, explain what that gray listing actually does. Because it sounds like a bureaucratic slap on the wrist, but it has real-world teeth, doesn't it?
Oh, it acts like a massive friction point for our economy. When the FATF gray lists a country, it essentially tells the entire global financial system that our country has deficiencies in combating money laundering and terrorist financing.
Ouch.
Yeah. So if a local PNG business tries to wire money to a supplier in Singapore or Australia, those foreign banks now require multiple layers of enhanced due diligence.
So it just bogs everything down.
Exactly. Transactions that used to take a day now take weeks of paperwork, or they just get rejected entirely. It throws sand directly into the gears of our international trade.
Man. So if the weak Kina makes our imports painfully expensive and the FATF gray listing makes international transactions incredibly difficult, who is actually winning in this environment?
Someone always wins.
Right, because a weak Kina means our exports are effectively on sale to the rest of the world. Somebody has to be cashing in on that competitive advantage. And according to our research stack, the winner is the agriculture sector, specifically cocoa.
Oh, absolutely. The cocoa market right now presents a staggering contrast between global chaos and local triumph. Let's look at the data from the Fairleigh Mitchell 2026 Cocoa Report.
Okay.
Globally, the cocoa supply chain essentially melted down. Major producers in West Africa suffered massive crop failures. And as a result, global prices became wildly volatile. I mean, in May 2025, cocoa hit an astronomical peak of $10,932 per metric ton.
That is insane.
But then by February 2026, it had cracked all the way down to $2,888 per ton.
That is the literal definition of a boom and bust roller coaster.
Truly.
But amidst all that global chaos, the autonomous Bougainville government, the ABG, was reporting historic record-breaking highs.
The numbers are phenomenal. In 2025, Bougainville produced roughly 23,500 metric tons of cocoa.
Wow.
And that level of production injected over 750 million Kina into the local and national economy.
750 million Kina pulled directly from the soil. And, that money isn't just vanishing into a multinational mining corporation's offshore account. That is capital flowing directly into rural communities. It's funding school fees, buying building materials, paying for local transport.
Exactly. And the key takeaway from the reports is to study the mechanism of how Bougainville achieved this. They didn't just get lucky with the weather.
Right. There was a strategy.
A very deliberate one. The ABG is taking progressive, systematic control of its industry through the Bougainville Agriculture Commodities Regulatory Authority, known as BPNG. And BPNG took the massive step of issuing its own localized export licenses to major players like Sancamap, AGMark, and Coconut Products Limited.
Now, why does a piece of paper like a local export license matter so much to the farmer out in the field sweating in the sun?
Because it creates accountability and data visibility. Before local licensing, buyers could operate without much oversight. They were sometimes mixing high-quality fermented beans with low-quality unfermented beans just to hit a volume quota.
Oh, which ruins the whole batch.
Exactly, and that destroys the region's reputation on the global market. By requiring a BACRA license, the government can systematically track exactly who is buying what from which district and at what quality. They are taking sovereign ownership of their supply chain data.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for you listening. This isn't just about local pride. It is about cold, hard access to international markets. The Fairleigh Mitchell Report highlights the new EU deforestation regulation, the EUDR.
This is a game changer.
Huge game changer. The European Union has completely rewritten the rules of access. You can no longer just dump a shipping container of cocoa in Rotterdam and collect a check. If you can prove through data that your cocoa comes from a certified, sustainable, deforestation-free supply chain, you receive a massive green premium on your price.
Yeah. In the modern agricultural market, traceability is literally a currency of its own.
Exactly. Michael Lames from the EU Straight PNG program emphasizes this heavily in the notes. He points out that getting that green premium isn't just about proving GPS coordinates. It relies heavily on the physical biology of the beans themselves.
It comes down to the science.
Yeah, maintaining high standards during the fermentation process is non-negotiable. If a farmer cuts corners and doesn't ferment the beans properly, the chemical profile of the cocoa is ruined. It tastes bitter, the European buyers reject it, and that premium vanishes. Quality control at the village level literally dictates international revenue.
It really does. And if we connect this macroeconomic success back to the micro reality on the ground, we have to ask a very human question.
What's that?
Well, 750 million Kina valuations and EU green premiums sound fantastic.
Yeah.
But who is actually out there in the heat, swinging the bush knife, carrying the heavy bags, and fermenting those beans to unlock this wealth?
That leads us right into our data from the Development Policy Center. We pulled a recent dev policy blog that looks closely at our human capital. Papua New Guinea currently has an estimated population of 11.7 million people, and a staggering 58% of that population is classified as youth, meaning they are under the age of 30.
And how that youth demographic interacts with agriculture totally defies the global average.
How so?
If you look at low-income countries around the world, the average age of a smallholder farmer is around 50 years old. Farming is often seen as an aging profession. But in PNG, surveys across East New Britain, Madang, and Bougainville reveal that the average cocoa farmer is incredibly young, just 38 years old.
Wow, 38. But I have to challenge this narrative a bit. It sounds very romantic on paper, right? Young farmers driving the economy. But we know the reality of the rural to urban drift.
Yeah, the migration to the cities.
Exactly. Almost every young person graduating high school in a rural province dreams of moving to Port Moresby or Ley. They want to wear a lanyard, sit in an air-conditioned office, work on a laptop. They often view village agriculture as a sign of failure or just grueling subsistence labor to survive, and they flock to the cities even though urban unemployment is incredibly high. So how do we convince a 22-year-old that the real wealth is actually back in the soil?
You are hitting on the exact friction point the research addresses, because you cannot convince them to stay if farming remains structured the way it always has been.
Right.
Traditionally in PNG, there is a very strict gendered division of labor. The men control the cash crops, like the cocoa trees, and therefore they control the income. The women are left to grow the vegetables and cacao for domestic consumption, and perhaps sell the surplus at the local market just to cover daily expenses.
That is the standard model most of us grew up observing in the village.
But that model is an economic bottleneck. The Dev Policy research highlights a brilliant intervention called the Family Farm Teams Program, or FFT, which is supported by ACIR. The FFT program doesn't just teach people how to plant better seeds, it fundamentally restructures the family unit into a corporate board.
A corporate board? How does that actually work in practice?
Well, it trains families to map out their labor and their finances together. Instead of the woman breaking her back over subsistence crops while the man handles the cocoa cash alone, the FFT approach ensures an equitable distribution of labor. Everyone shares the burden.
That makes a lot of sense.
And crucially, women get an equal voice in allocating the capital. And this is where the youth come in. The program actively integrates young people into the business planning, the logistics, and the marketing side of the farm.
So we are shifting the paradigm for that 22-year-old. They aren't just an unpaid laborer swinging a bush knife for their parents anymore. They become the supply chain manager for a lucrative family enterprise.
Exactly. And the World Bank report echoes this urgency. They call for the removal of structural barriers, things like fixing feeder roads and improving access to rural finance.
Which is so desperately needed.
Right. When you combine those macro-level infrastructure fixes with the micro-level FFT business training, agriculture suddenly becomes a highly competitive career path. Think about the EUDR green premium we discussed earlier.
Yeah, the traceability data.
To get that premium, you need sophisticated mobile tracking apps to log farm data. A 50-year-old farmer might struggle with that, but a 20-something with a smartphone. They are perfectly equipped to manage that digital traceability.
They already know how to use the tech. So what does this all mean for you listening today? We have journeyed from the inflation metrics at the central bank all the way to the cocoa fermentaries in Bougainville. The ultimate takeaway here is that Papua New Guinea's macroeconomic survival, our ability to stabilize the Kina, fight off core inflation, and clear those foreign exchange queues, does not rely solely on massive multinational mining operations.
No, it really doesn't.
It is entirely dependent on empowering the micro level.
The foundation of our economic future rests on that 38-year-old cocoa farmer. It rests on the family farm teams sharing the labor equitably. And it rests on integrating our massive youth population into modern, data-driven agricultural businesses.
Which brings us to one final provocative thought we want to leave you with. We mentioned the Fairleigh Mitchell Report's data on global cocoa trends earlier, but what we saved for the end is their data on our neighbor, Indonesia.
Yes, the Indonesian data is basically a masterclass in economic evolution. Indonesia has successfully shifted away from simply exporting raw, unprocessed agricultural commodities.
They leveled up.
They absolutely did. They've aggressively built up their downstream processing capabilities. In 2024 alone, Indonesia exported 386,600 metric tons of processed cocoa goods.
Wow.
We're talking about things like cocoa butter, cocoa powder, and cocoa liquor.
They are capturing the massive value addition that happens between the raw bean and the final chocolate product, and they're doing it right next door to us.
So the question we must ask ourselves is this. Given PNG's massive tech-savvy youth demographic and the new mobile technologies they are already adopting to secure international green premiums, is it possible for our next generation to completely skip the grueling traditional subsistence farming model?
Oh, I see where you're going.
Could they leapfrog straight into building a domestic high-tech agricultural processing empire right here in Papua New Guinea?
That is the vision for the future worth working toward. The true wealth isn't just pulling raw materials from the soil, it is in the downstream industries we can build from it. Thank you for pulling up a chair and joining us in the research room today. We hope this deep dive gave you the tools to understand the invisible mechanisms driving the economy around you. Keep looking past the surface headlines, keep questioning the world, and remember, sometimes healing the economy means slowly lowering the spillway on the dam so the downstream soil can finally thrive. See you on our next deep dive.